Margaret. What was it about the door? You could so easily have left it open. Was it closed in order that you could not follow your heart's instinct to survive? The spirit would be trapped thereafter, locked in with you, left alone with its own mortality, to face the crew as they rudely burst through. The door would have saved you from your folly. It was your one last stand to make the world finally understand. You had to try to end your life, to get your story told. The isolated dark of the day, by the light of your life, you wanted to cry, to draw, or yet to write, but not to die. And yet you would have known from Sylvia that Monday morning about the margin of error that comes into play with a vengeance customary and still within the time scale converging on a crisis. Was it a last pitched gamble that went wrong, or were you left there on your own? It is too late. Margaret was made to wait too long and abandoned in the heart of Camden to die, and by her own hand, just to get things done, to persuade someone to listen, that no one be refused, their needs unmet, with nothing but the spirit and its fee left to loiter on the banks of Lethe. When I try to think about the 7 hours it would eventually take to rescue you, I feel the panic even more. The endless hours it would take for you to be allowed to die, and with no one to stay your hand. The locked door, your bitter response to the hospital doors closed on you, as the tablets took effect after. While you waited for them to suddenly come, to break their way in before the end could begin, but you would not live to see it happen, abandoned and left to fend. They were to say you died around midday. They knocked first thing, then simply went away. You should have been in the day hospital or on a ward, which is where you wanted to be. Not this sudden political destiny, the ward off limits instead. You were never forgiven for Christine Blake. You gave it to the managers straight, a death by hanging when she should have been observed, discharging herself to her fate. You let them have it, holding a mirror to Medusa and turning them to stone. You fought for our therapy from the core of your being, not for yourself alone. Yet you were blind to discrimination. They let you die believing they would come. Margaret had been told she was becoming too dependent on the day hospital. Yet an assessment date was penciled in after her death. This setback was crucial. The statement would lead directly to an overdose and her subsequent death by default, the unmentionable life ban on any acute admission, awry and still in place after. The crisis team killed her by knowingly dragging their feet, by withholding a bed, and, like Christine before her, left to accomplish her feat. Her recent warning attempt had been scored as nothing, and the last one was ignored. You were suffering from anxiety. You knew the end was near. 3 years ago, everything went wrong, and it was simply a matter of time from then. The shadow of Christine Blake was now the nemesis and template for future care in Camden, subsumed under the aegis of crisis team remedies, with only the garden and art therapy a fleeting refuge for us all. Back then, against all reason, you were discharged home to face a deluge. You would overdose there in the flood on amitriptyline, your spirit broken and found by random chance and awoken. You began to cry when you were reading Dismantling Fordwich House. You knew by then it would all be swept away, and nothing would remain after but a barred Eden. What was coming in its place would not touch the surface, yet the new reality was final. Its weight was certain death. Such was the shortfall after the remedy of care on the cheap. The crisis teams all we were worth, with a fast track to the grave if they got in. The pity of it all. The hunger strikes, the protests. What you gave just to keep a day hospital going, with nothing but your death for the showing. She was to be left alone, to manage a life full of perpetual sorrows, and nothing after can ever assuage this. But your dreams will sound through the hollows of their minds in the certainty of things to come. You gave your life for the future, for art therapy and for what it brings. You were given the crisis team to cure your imaginings for a little while. Like the chief, you gave up, resolved to fight no more, unable to go the last mile. Out of hearing, and always beyond sight, that willing compromise of mental health by arbitrary proscription and stealth. This poem, My Soul's Garden, was written by Margaret a couple of months before her death. I do think it points the way to her fate and to her death. My Soul's Garden. Welcome to the silver gates made from 1,000 spirals. Welcome to the stream, the toad on the rock, the stepping stones to comfort, tenderness, and a loving angel presence. Why do I let other people distract, disturb me, turn me from my passionate purpose? Why do they laugh when they should weep with the grief of it, the pain of not loving, or of only finding love at the bottom of a well with a bucket that is broken? Thirsty for love and water, I search my soul's garden, where all but a few things have been destroyed. Who has done this? Who? The beloved. Why would she demolish everything except this shining stream? Here on the bank is the cup of connectedness. I shall take a sip and taste our loneliness. Margaret Walsh was born within a mile of me in Leeds in April 1942. I was born in 1948. She died on the 9th of May in 2005 from an overdose. My mother worked at Killingbeck Hospital in Leeds with Margaret's mother. I would only realise this many, many years later. I never knew Margaret in Leeds, only at Fordwich House, where we both did art therapy together. Christine Blake was a sculptress, and she seemed to concentrate on pottery, but she also attended for art therapy in the art room. I wore Margaret's confirmation dress in Leeds, and from being the most poorly dressed girl at St Patrick's School, I was suddenly transformed into a princess for an afternoon, thanks to Margaret's mother. I believe it was Margaret's mother that urged my mother to have an examination for a lump she had on her breast, which she had told no one about for a couple of years. And we knew many, many people in common. I would like to read the poem to Christine Blake. Christine's death, 3 years before Margaret's own death, deeply affected Margaret, and we could not put it behind us. Christine Blake, in Memoriam. Christine died in her home in Fordwich Road, a few doors away from the West Hampstead Day Hospital. Christine had been denied this refuge. June 1945 to April 2002. When I summon together all the chance encounters which have existed between us, trying to weigh them with the distance of things unsaid, the unlit future seen by you alone, there was so little to go on. You seemed to be living only in the interval of time left to you, slowly foundering, clinging to anyone who would listen. But we could not hear or see, as you were swept by a current too far out to reach. Something beyond fear failed to prevent what you finally meant, left to mutely disappear without trace, suspended from a life you could not face. Alone on Tuesday morning, just 13 weeks into the year, the first day after Easter, you put an end to what had been an unmanageable existence, where another afternoon Another night was not within your reason or the span of things. Whatever intercession might have happened, it was too late. As a fan too widely opened, you could not get back. The separate panels of your life were locked into place. A surface on the rack of being that yet could go no further, while the ark that held it all suddenly gave way to the last trace of your story. Even your death was as though for a crime you did not commit, then left to hang there, already too late, without enough time left over between before and after, just to turn about and run the distance of your own road to the day hospital only yards from your own door. By chance, beyond chance and equilibrium, left unequal to the task. It would remain a journey you would never make. Even the words failed, leaving you unable to ask or see the day outside, where darkness within trailed. Something beyond fear was all you could hear, and the silence of it hurrying near. Our Lady's candles were still emerging. Chestnut leaves unspread, recently broken under hazed green smoke, were slowly drifting upward through the grey pall of winter, when you suddenly turned away from it all. A single candle in the space behind you, at the last lap of your funeral, burned through the terminal silence, your mind a plan, a last mechanical journey into an inferno which would enfold you with intangible reality as you passed before us into the hold of time, where sunlight and material darkness broke from the cordon of April. Even meaning somehow seems to fall short. Words which refuse to adhere to a page, fear to bear the weight of the way you fought to live, or the uncomprehending rage for the way you would die. All the panic that happened, which the years could not amend, and night and morning broken by the tick and sound of a countdown right to the end, when you could then reckon on your fingers, on one hand, all the people still installed in your day. A collective guilt lingers, and it will not go away. Your life stalled, reduced to fashioning an open noose, oblivion from which you were cut loose. It was all over by the time they broke through the door, and final as a cry for help that came too late, helpless in the spoke of light mutely entering the heart's core, as someone began to knock on your door. The only barricade against a world you simply could not cope with any more. Left to its silence with the end untold, and left for others to find or fathom, to sound the days you could barely get through, as one by one all the things you had come to depend on, were kicked away from you. Too weak to fight, you tried to surrender, to ransom what you could not remember. Only 30 days ago was the last day of Easter, and the long-awaited opening impact of April, a mask beneath which you struggled unabated as you went for a walk for the final time in Regent's Park, and where even while accompanied as on a casual outing, your mind was trapped in a trial for your life on your last full afternoon. Who judged you that you should die by your own hand, or ordered that your death come so soon? Was there no defence as you stood alone, no one to witness your execution, with no last reprieve after hope had gone? Who will pay Charon now for your spirit, taken before its time, without tender or absolution, from a place unlit, a closed, unvisited ruin, a world where hidden beneath unshifting, bending girders exists a brief reality? There the bewildered heart can find no rest or refuge, a surface without any vestigial foothold or anything to cling to, yet an interval after, with no origin, recurring untold, without end, as the spirit, unrehearsed, is left to its first silence, left to the shadows that lodge on the banks of Lethe. You became just another unmentioned casualty of the drawn-out chaos resounding around you, pursuing you even to the mouth of the far harbour, where you sought for refuge from a breaking storm gathering endlessly before you. Found to be wanting, you were judged to be guilty, accused of using too many resources. The therapeutic structure which had been keeping you afloat, keeping you from drifting slowly too far out, was suddenly taken away from you, shunned and left to an inexorable fate, left there to wait until it was too late. Instinctively we kept to the distance left between us, too afraid of being a burden to each other. But you were the focus of a gravitational force which seemed to ebb and flow around you whenever you were there. I remember an ordinary afternoon, and you were talking about art and orgy march, and seemed almost beside yourself, with an overflowing feeling for everything that day. You were so relieved to be there. It was as though you had been rescued from something unimaginable. I see you still in a crowd, ineffaceable. I seemed to span at that time the distance between Christine, who died in 2002, and Margaret, who died in May 2005. I would find myself, like them, barred from Fordwich House, otherwise known as the West Hampstead Day Hospital. Unlike Margaret and Christine, I didn't give in. I fought back, and in 2004, after contesting the way the Chair of Poetry had been run yet again in Oxford, where I failed to gain enough nominations, I had staged a 2-month protest on the steps of Martyr's Memorial. This thrilled Margaret and excited her no end. But it wearied me travelling to Oxford and back, and 8 hours on the steps of Martyr's Memorial, and I vowed never to enter the lists for the Chair of Poetry again. My strangest protest was to sit on the lawn of Fordwich House Day Hospital to protest about my own, how shall I say, my own, the impossibility of trying to get a place there. Fordwich House was remarkable before it was swept away, in that there was a studio there and we all met there, and art therapy, it was a full-time studio from 10 until 4 with a wonderful garden to look out onto. It was like an ark, and there was a wonderful art therapist called Paul Danvers, who was forced into early retirement when the day hospital closed. I think the day hospital in West Hampstead opened about 2 years after Sylvia Plath's own suicide in 1962. And I sometimes think that had she had that option, she might have lived. During that protest for 3 weeks, I received a lot of support from the public on that road, that wonderful road just up from Finchley Road Tube Station, just off Shoot Up Hill on the way to Cricklewood. The public thought it was wonderful that a patient was fighting back. Margaret was thrilled, but urged me to seek shelter from the sun under the spiralling branches of a fir tree, and under its canopy I wrote this poem for Margaret. The Fordwich House Protest. The Darkest Rim. My destiny was to be turned away, rudely pushed back always to the furthest edge, the darkest rim of the livid day, wherein I dwell without purpose or rest. Yet I have seen great sycamore leaves turn, closing like fingers on their own surface, exposing whitened hands of paper-thin drained skin, holding something fast as they brace before an onslaught, an upsurging storm, clenched and deliberate, and as though they held everything vestigial locked within. Long after this day's vanishing away, look for me in the shadows. I exist only as the pariah in your midst.